Islamism is derived from the religion of Islam. However, it's also an amalgamation of many, many other ideas that came from outside of the religion of Islam as well. It's not that it can be separated from Islam, of course it can be. And actually one of the most important things my fellow Muslims can do is directly, head-on, admit to the fact that there is a relationship. Because unless we do that, then we're unable to tackle some of the theological elements that Islamism exploits to justify itself. So there is a relationship. There are other ideas that came actually from Arab socialism, or otherwise known as Baathism. And of course, in the post-colonial environment of the Middle East, in particular in Egypt in 1928, is where all of these things merged together in the founding of the Muslim Brotherhood. Islamism was built on the back of Arab socialism, ideas of a super-state and a super-people, that's expansion, ideas of a perfect society, in fact, ideas of a state per se. The very notion of a state with a unitary legal system is actually a Western idea that Islamists co-opted via Arab socialism, via Baathism, and then superimposed on the religion of Islam. So yes, there's definitely a relationship, and that relationship needs to be explored in frankly, in a lot more of an honest way than it currently is.
Okay, but what do I say to Guy? I told this to a guy, who is a Muslim guy, and because I've read your book, and he said, ask Mr. Nawaz the following: is the Prophet Mohammed then the messenger of Islam or Islamism?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, the Prophet Muhammad, you see, this is the essence of the debate. And actually, I wish that there was an audience as well attended as you all are here of my fellow Muslims, because I really want this conversation to be among fellow Muslims as well. And unfortunately, what happens is, and I know that the organizers here have tried to invite many, unfortunately, when I began, I said this conversation is constantly shut down. That's part of the problem. I wish other Muslims asked me this question, because I used to think that the Prophet Muhammad is the Prophet of Islamism. Now actually, there's a huge historical, there's 1400 years of this debate that's been going on. What I now believe is not that Islam is a religion of anything. Actually, Islam is a religion. Like any other religion, it's interpreted by Muslims. And what Muslims make of Islam is what Islam is. So I'm not going to give you a theological kind of rebuttal to this assertion. What I'm going to give you are plausible answers for what the Prophet Muhammad could have been. As well as it's plausible he could have been a prophet of Islamism. If that's true, it's also plausible that those who interpret Islam, that the Prophet Muhammad was the real founder of Islamism, not Islam per se, that in fact the first Islamist was the Prophet Muhammad, that in fact it's the essence of Islam, that it seeks to rule and dominate and conquer, it's a plausible interpretation. I won't deny that. But so is the following. When the Prophet Muhammad says, أَنْتُمْ أَعْلَمُكُمْ بِشُؤُونِ دُنْيَاكُمْ, in the hadith in Arabic, which means you know better than me in your worldly affairs. The context of that hadith came in the context where he was asked a question about the irrigation of land, and he screwed up the answer, frankly. Right? He got it wrong. And the crops didn't come to harvest the next year. And a Bedouin came and said to him, I thought you were the prophet of God. How did this go wrong? Right? And he said, well, you know, you asked me about how to pray, and I can tell you how to pray. You asked me about your crops, I don't have an idea. You know better than I do. And that was the context of the hadith. أَنْتُمْ أَعْلَمُكُمْ بِشُؤُونِ دُنْيَاكُمْ. This creates a discussion, which is actually very old within the history of Islam, about the division of that which is religious and that which is otherwise known as worldly, for want of a better term. Right? Now, when the Prophet was, and he was the ruler of Medina, I'm giving you a different story. I'm not saying it's the correct story, it's a different story. And that's important to note here. Yeah?